Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina wa Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahabatihi ajma'een. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Alhamdulillah. Today we will speak about one of the gardens that really requires us to be more ponderous in our nature, more reflective, and that is the nature of reflection or reflection itself. We are told in a hadith told by the Prophet ﷺ, La ibadata katafakkur, that there is nothing, there is no worship like deep reflective thought, because each thought about Allah creates a new thought, and each new thought creates a new appreciation, and with it we have a new reason to thank Allah. So the more that we think, the more we come to appreciate, and the more we come to appreciate, the more that we'll be moved to thank. They say that reflection is like the mirror of the believer, since in this mirror of the mind, he sees his good and he sees his bad. So the more we are able to self-reflect about ourselves, the more we can see who we actually are. And there's many, many things, of course, and hopefully we'll speak about this in terms of the things that we can reflect on. One of the things that we can take here is the nature of time itself. And why is it, for instance, that we seem to experience time much faster than those people who came before us? And that we are also told by the Prophet ﷺ that as the final hour approaches, time itself will be as if it's become faster. Why is that? Time as a measure, it's a constant measure. The concept of time for us and for them, it's the same. So why the difference? If we take time as a measure of change, in other words, how is it that we actually measure time? You know, if I wanted to measure a table, I'd get a measuring yard out and I'd be able to measure how long, tall a particular object is. How are we to measure time? Well, we measure time by movement. We measure time by change. 24 hours in a day by the Earth rotating on its axis, for example. 365 days a year by the Earth moving or revolving around the sun. And of course, our dear brother, Dr. Amal, has been quite remarkably and beautifully going through the nature of the celestial realm and all the various beautiful signs that we find therein. And so that being the case, that time is measured by change, what's the question then that we should ask? What has the modern world given us? The modern world has given us a lot more of the things that change, and we call this progress, by the way, or perhaps one of the most destructive ideas known to man. New phones, new cars, it's given us new houses, new TVs. If we could, we probably would even want to get new versions of ourselves if we could. And some people, in fact, even try that. So because time is the measure of change, and the modern world has given us so many things that change, our understanding and perception of time seems as if it is moving a lot quicker than it actually is. But what's really interesting is that let's look at the Qur'an and what it tells us about time. Surah Al-Asr. Wal Asr, Allah tells us in the Qur'an. By time, Allah is taking an oath by time itself. Innal insana lafi khusr. That man is in loss. But then we're told that there's some people who are not in loss. Illa alladhina amanu. Except those who believe. And what's belief? Belief is a fixed state. Belief isn't something which changes. And then we're told about those who amilu salihat, who engage in good deeds. And what are those good deeds? The same set of things again and again and again until we meet Allah. And then we're also told, وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ, the ones who advise each other to the truth. And what's the nature of truth is that it's fixed. The truth doesn't change. And again, incredibly, that al-haqq, that's one of the names of Allah, the unchanging. And then those who وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, who advise or call each other to patience. Again, patience is being constant in something, not changing. So look at the dichotomy that's being set up. On the one hand, we have those things which are permanent and never change. And on the other hand, we have something which its very nature is change. And if we decide to live in this paradigm here, which is the one of not changing, time for us would be constant. We'd feel the blessings of time. But if someone chooses to live in paradigm of the world, that's where all the change is taking place. And that's where the measure of time is then faster. One of the words for reflection in the Arabic language is i'tibar, the notion of i'tibar, wherein we reflect and take lessons from past generations. These stories, as we've mentioned, they're not stories for the sake of storytelling, but so that we can come to know something of those who went before us, the mistakes that they made, and how we were meant to learn. That's one thing we'll notice again and again and again. These stories, they remind us of the human condition, which plays out again and again and again. And then if we look at the word i'tibar itself, what do we find? Abara is a root word, which means to cross something. It also is the word for tears comes from abara. And so it's almost so as if it's telling us that we can only really get somewhere, we can only really cross over to somewhere if we reflect. There's a connection between those two words. And then we have the word tadabbur, another word used in the Qur'an, afala tatadabbarun, do you not reflect? And dubar in Arabic is the posterior of someone, the backside. And the idea here is that in the state of tadabbur, one is going and following something from the beginning to its logical conclusion, right to the end. Tadabbur, following it all the way to the end. And then we have the word nazar, and it's interesting again to note that the word nazara can mean both to look and to reflect. It seems to be telling us that all we really need to do is open our eyes. What is in front of us is enough to make us reflect. The very act of opening our eyes calls for reflection. And when we do open our eyes, what do we see? We see the alam, the world. And again, what's really interesting to note here is the word alam shares its root with the word alama, which means a sign. So the world is like a series of signs which, if we open our eyes, see the world, alam, reflect, nazar, we will see that this world was not created in vain. As Allah tells us, رَبَّنَا مَا خَلَقْتَ هَذَا بَاطِلًا. You did not create this without purpose. Allah Most High in the Quran tells us, أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبِلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. Look at the imagery that's being set up here. The Arabs, they were well aware of the deserts, intimately familiar with the deserts. When they set out, they knew its dangers, but they also knew that in such a wide expanse of open space, this is the time for deep reflection. And at that point, where does man look? Allah asks him, if he looks to his riding beast, what does Allah say? أَفَلَا يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَى الْإِبْلِ كَيْفَ خُلِقَتْ. Do they not look at the camels and how it has been created? And if he looks up towards the heavens, because he's all by himself sometimes in the deserts, nothing around him. He looks to his beast, Allah asks him the question. He looks up, what does Allah say? وَإِلَى السَّمَاءِ كَيْفَ رُفِعَتْ. How the heavens have been lifted up. And then if he looks around him, what is he being asked? وَإِلَى الْجِبَالِ كَيْفَ نُصِبَتْ. How the mountains have been raised high. And if he looks down, وَإِلَى الْأَرْضِ كَيْفَ سُطِحَتْ. How the earth has been spread out. Every which way that man can look, Allah is asking him a question. And then what does he tell the Prophet ﷺ? فَذَكِّرْ. So, O Prophet ﷺ, warn them. إِنَّمَا أَنْتَ مُذَكِّرْ. You are your task is to warn them. And this is interesting because you see, the scholars differentiate between the word dhikra and the word ilm. In Arabic, the word dhikra is for something that we already know and we're just being reminded. And so the Quran is referred to as, one of its names is dhikra, that which reminds you. It's not called ilm. Of course, it contains knowledge, but it's not described as ilm. It's described as dhikra in terms of its function. And so, what's the difference is that ilm is something that we come to know about, something that we didn't know and we came to know, ilm. Whereas dhikra is something that we already know and we're having to be reminded of it. In other words, what we can see that the Prophet ﷺ is being told, look, just remind them. All they have to do after they have seen these signs and reflected is just for them to be reminded. That's it. Oh Allah, you did not create this without purpose. This tree that I've walked past my entire life, I understand why you put it there, to remind me of you, to remind me that this tree and me, we both depend on you. And inshallah, in the coming sessions, the coming gatherings, we will hopefully speak about the nature of trees and how trees are such a complex creature that just by learning more about them, we would say, Subhanaka ma khalaqta, Rabbana ma khalaqta hadha batila. Oh Allah, you did not create this in vain. So these are clear proofs that demonstrate Allah's existence. The book of nature itself is a clear proof. But for whom? لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Its lub is literally that part which is deep inside something. It's for those people who are really diving deep down, not for those who are overcome by their worldly desires. For such people who are overcome by their worldly desires, the intelligibility of reason becomes clouded by temptations and base desires. But such people will never admit that it is their desires where the problem lies. But rather for them, they will make the excuse that, no, it's the proofs that make sense. Really? Can we really say that? You see, the Quran is constantly challenging us, constantly challenging us. It's pulling us out of our comfort zone. Do you not think? Do you not reflect? Have you not heard? Did you not see? What about this? What about that? It's calling us to think. Reading the Quran is not a passive experience. If Allah did not want us to use our intellects, why would He have made us rational beings and then made us mukallaf, i.e., responsible and accountable in front of Him? It's because on the basis of our intellect that we have responsibility, and then repeatedly asked us in the Quran to reflect, to engage, to think, to look. The Quran is welcoming us with its questions, with our questions, but it's also warning us that once the answers have become clear and manifest, what excuse do you have left for not submitting yourself? Is it really that you haven't been able to work it out? Or is it really something within your own self that's preventing you? So we ask Allah to make us from amongst those who submit to Him, reflect on His signs, and then thank Him for everything that we have. Walillahil hamd. So inshallah, maybe we'll just spend a few moments if there's any questions. Alhamdulillah. Of course, the question here is Allah nature and is nature Allah? We don't frame it like that, evidently. I mean, if it's a poetic sense, that does nature remind us of Allah, and that in thinking of Allah, we can see that nature comes from Him, that's, a more theologically appropriate way for us to refer to that. We wouldn't say that is nature Allah and is Allah nature. That's has connotations which are a bit theologically problematic. Yes, walaikum salam. How is it that we, and there's inverted commas around here, are responsible for failing to submit when Allah guides whom He wills and seals the hearts of whom He wills? That's a good question. And evidently, a few minutes on a live YouTube stream are not enough to answer that. But let it be known that Allah has given us choice. He has given us intellect. He has given us all opportunities to come to know about him. And if you really want to know what those verses in the Quran mean, that Allah guides whom He wills and seals the hearts of whom He wills, then we need to go back and spend some time and try to understand in a sensible way, what those verses actually mean. It's our choices that we are taking into account for. We don't believe in determinism. I would like to ask that beyond the sort of base level, does one need to be affiliated to a sheikh or spiritual path in order to fully realize these lofty states? The notion of a virtuous person and the notion of virtue and high grounds and high character, it's always been known across all traditions that the easiest way to come to those lofty states, to rectify one's character, is by following a guide. Aristotle makes this clear in his Nicomachean Ethics as well, that it's easier to follow a moral person, a virtuous person, than to read about it as theory in books. Doesn't mean that by reading the theory in books and by really striving and intending that you won't reach there, but the journey is made easier if you have someone who's already quote unquote done it, someone who's already traveling that path. So most definitely makes it's a facilitation which has been understood by all of the majority of Islam, and especially Sunni Islam, and of course other groups apart from Sunni Islam, that taking a guide is a meritorious thing to do. What is a practicality of performing deep reflection? Are there stated guidelines? Not guidelines, as they say, just we have to open our eyes and reflect. And you see, even the way that life unfolds, we will notice if we pay attention, there's no fortuitousness to life. Things happen in a way that really bring us to appreciate that Allah is controlling for the better the things that happen. And so it's really being able to take yourself away. That's rather than guidelines. We should perhaps think about how we can begin the process of being able to reflect and putting ourselves in environments that could be places in our home, it could be outside somewhere in the open countryside, things which are conducive to that majesty, mountains, open countrysides, sometimes even looking at those majestic animals that Allah's created. It's many ways that we can learn how to reflect. Alhamdulillah. Why was Ash'ari and Maturidi Aqidah needed? Prior to them, were the previous generations on the Athari Aqidah? Some deep questions, interesting historical questions. Evidently, those who ask such questions know that these questions cannot be answered in a few minutes on YouTube. They require, as we just mentioned in this class, reflection, deep thought. And if someone is really keen on being able to seek answers for those questions, they need to take time out, speak to scholars so that scholars can explain to them how these manifestations of knowledge occurred throughout history, and whether that's the Ash'ari school, the Maturidi school, the Athari school, whichever one it may be, we have to have due course. And that's the respect for knowledge as well. Knowledge is not something that comes about. Even these reminders, we're just bound by 15-20 minutes, and that's what it is, a dhikra, just a reminder. But structured knowledge must occur in a structured way that takes note of the respect that we should afford it as well. And you're welcome to come to Cambridge Muslim College anytime, and hopefully we can sit and speak about these questions at length. Alhamdulillah. Allah bless you. Thank you so much. Again, wonderful to see everyone from so many different parts of the world. Please continue to keep both the college and everyone who's partaking in this month of Ramadan in your prayers. And inshallah, we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.